Hey, eighth period. I'm sorry not to be with you today, but I wanted to go over some critical content that is important for a lesson before dying. So you're gonna need your book because we're gonna mark some passages in the book today, and we're gonna take some notes over symbolism. We've already talked about symbolism. We discussed it with Romeo and Juliet, but we're just gonna spiral back a little bit and pick up some of those concepts, and then think more specifically about symbolism in a lesson before dying. And then there are some passages I'm going to have you mark. In addition, hopefully you already did the Padlet and participated in that way. I know you guys love your Padlets. And then also, I want to make sure that you know where to find the video clip. It is a little bit lengthy. Not everything goes exactly with what we're doing in the book, but it's a pretty good depiction of the content of these chapters. And then in addition to that, it has, shows you like the jail, and you see Grant and Jefferson meet, and you can see sort of the tension and conflict between them. You see the tension and conflict that Grant has with Tan Lu, and how their relationship is sort of, he respects her, but he's frustrated. You're introduced to the idea of Vivian. So this particular part is really, really important. So I just want to make sure you know where to find it. And then when you're watching, maybe pop in some AirPods or earbuds so that you can watch it quietly. Or you can always partner up with somebody if you need to watch it as well. Okay. Let me share my screen for a minute, and I'm going to go to our slides and our slide deck for just a second. And pardon me, I know I had the slides pulled up. Let me just move this over for a minute. There we go. Okay, so here are our slides for the day. So again, hopefully you already did this, and then you did your Focus Friday. Hopefully your spirit animal is delightful. I'm really excited to look at the Padlet and see what you guys chose. We talked through some of these, I think, when we talked about symbolism with Romeo and Juliet, but each of these is symbolic of a variety of different things. So when you look at these symbols, and this might be something that you want to note in your book in the front, wherever you're taking notes. When you look at these symbols, we see the Statue of Liberty, we see apple, and apples are symbolic of a million things. We see the peace sign, we see the owl, we see the horseshoe, but in Indianapolis, that's obviously symbolic of the Colts. We see the symbols for the two major political parties in our country. We see gold rings, which are symbolic of the institution of marriage in a lot of ways. And then we see the American flag. So these are symbols that I just want you to think about what each one of them represents. You're welcome to pause the video and take a second and talk to someone else about them. Or you can simply jot a few of these down in your book and make note about what you think each of these things symbolizes, okay? Now, when you move to the next slide, you'll see the full definition of symbolism. We have talked about this with Romeo and Juliet for sure, but you're welcome to write it down again in your book if you're just, want to take notes again or just want a refresher. When an object has meaning beyond its literal definition or its literal physical thing, it can be symbolic. Symbolism is interesting because almost everything can be symbolic of something. Colors are symbolic, animals are symbolic, people can be symbolic, places can be symbolic. And so when something functions as a visible representation for an abstract idea or emotion, so I always think of the red heart. And when you see a red heart, you immediately think of, hopefully the answer was love. And so when we think of the red heart as a symbol, it goes beyond meaning what it is to like representing this abstract concept, right? So for example, the horseshoe symbolizes the Colts, but it is also symbolic of good luck. Or the Statue of Liberty symbolizes lots of things. She symbolizes New York City. She symbolizes a relationship that we once had with France. She symbolizes immigration and safety and protection and all kinds of things. And so when an object goes beyond what it is to stand for something bigger, it becomes symbolic, okay? So here are just a bunch of examples also that if you want to screenshot, or if you want, again, if you're note taking in the front of your book, either on Post-its or you're note taking, in the margins on your book, that would be a good place where you could write a few things down. Okay. I'm going to give you just a second, or you can pause the video so that you have a minute to write some stuff down if you need to. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. So here are just a bunch of applications. Birds are interestingly symbolic of peace and freedom. So birds, and lots of different birds represent different kinds of things, right? Like the blue, beautiful macaws in the movie Rio are sort of like gorgeous, rare party birds. But a finch that can sing, or a hummingbird, birds have lots of different meanings. A peacock means something very different from like the red cardinal. But when you look at the symbol on the left, when you put the bird in a cage and the bird breaks free, this can represent or symbolize being trapped or being stuck. And we read some stories at the beginning of the year where birds were stuck or trapped. And then when it breaks out, it represents freedom, or it represents breaking out of bondage in some way. So there's a beautiful poem and a representative piece by Maya Angelou called "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." And ultimately breaking free of that cage, right, represents freedom. Okay, so there's one. This one, we have three different weather landscapes here. We have the fog, which is mysterious and suspenseful. We have the rainbow, which can often symbolize a new beginning or prosperity. And then we have the sunset, which is symbolic of, like, it can be romantic, but it can also be symbolic of the end of an era or the end of something important. Okay. So it's interesting how weather can be symbolic of very different things. And then I ask what other symbols you can think of. Okay, so I'm really now we're gonna pop into a lesson before dying, and we're gonna think about some things in a lesson before dying that are symbolic. Okay, so I'm gonna have you jot these down in your book somewhere or on a Post-it. And when you do, I want you to write, like, what does that thing represent or symbolize? Okay, so for example, food. Okay, food can symbolize a variety of different things. I want you to jot down a couple of things that food can symbolize or represent. Okay, the next one. The car. This is Grant's car. And cars also are symbolic. Cars are interesting as you guys are starting to do driver training or thinking about it, and eventually you'll get your license. Cars have very important symbolism in especially American culture for a variety of different reasons. Okay. This is a picture of the back door. And I really want you to stretch your brain a little bit and think about, what in the book does the back door represent or symbolize, especially for Grant, but also for Tanlu and for Miss Emma? What does the back door symbolize? And then obviously, and probably the most important symbol in the book so far, and the one that kind of hits the closest to home, right? So we know what this is, and I want you to think, what is this particular animal symbolic of in our book, and why is that so profound and poignant and frustrating, and also what does it lead to, right? I think that's important to think about as well. Okay, so what I hope you'll do, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second, is I really want you on a Post-it like this maybe, or again in the front of your book or the back of your book or somewhere where you're taking notes. I want you to, jot them down. So I want you to think about each of those symbols and what do they represent, or what are they symbolic of, because they're very important to our book and what's happening in our book. Okay. Okay. I just need you for like a couple more minutes. You've been really patient with a very long lesson, and I appreciate that. Okay. So let me share my screen for a second. All right. That was weird. I don't know what to, oh, there we go. Okay. These are just a series of passages that I want you to mark. And what we'll do is you can certainly look through these questions and think about these questions, and you can make notes on these questions. And frankly, even if you're sitting with someone and you want to quietly talk about them, that's fine. But these are passages that we will definitely talk about when I see you again on Tuesday. Okay. So I give you the page numbers and I want you to highlight, mark, or underline or bracket or whatever each of these passages. All right. So passage number 1 is on pages 68 and 69. It's a setting passage. Passage number 2 is when Grant and Jefferson meet, and it's a sort of characterization passage. Passage number 3 is on page 76, and it's an inference passage about Jefferson's character. Passage number 4 is on page 79. So I want you to mark that passage. And then finally, passage number 5 is on pages 83 and 84. And man, oh man, this is a kind of gut-wrenching scene, actually. So make sure that you mark it. And again, guys, you just need to mark these. If you want to take a minute and talk with a shoulder partner or somebody near you quietly about what's going on in the passages, that's fine. Otherwise, just make sure you mark them in your book, okay? Now, most important though, and last thing I need to say to you, I want you to watch A Lesson Before Dying clip 2. So you're going to end up clicking on this, but it'll probably take you to YouTube to watch it. It is about 20 minutes. It's not a short clip. And again, some of it is different from our text, but it still gives us really good context and helps us visualize what's going on in the text. And then there is a film analysis, just a really short little activity that I want you to do on Canvas when you finish watching this video, okay? So I want you, when you're finished with the video, I want you to go to Canvas and I want you to complete the film analysis activity that is in the module, all right? And then all I need you to do is read 12 and 13 for your homework. Make sure that you're caught up on your reading. And I will see you guys on Tuesday, okay? Email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, thanks for being thoughtful and getting all your work done today. Bye, guys.